Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to tell you a little bit about what my favourite books of 2021 were. I haven't done one of these videos for a couple of years because this time last year I was having a bit of a booktube break. So when I came back to filming, it just felt too long ago to do a best book list, and I can't remember if I did one the year before, but I'm doing one this year just because there were some really great books that I read. What I've done, I've got 12 books on this list, it's one per month. I've gone back through my list of books that I read in 2021 and picked a favourite book from each month. This won't necessarily be the same as when I pick my best books in each of my stats videos, partly because I can't remember what those books necessarily were, and partly because this is more what has stayed with me. And so when I look back at the list at the end of the year, it's what has stuck in my mind as being what I enjoyed most that month. And it might not necessarily be the same as the one that I immediately felt at the end of the month was my favourite. I will also say that I decided not to include any rereads in this list, otherwise Becky Chambers would have won multiple months. So it felt safer to exclude the Wayfarers rereads that I did, and so only include books that I'd read for the first time, just to give it a bit more diversity to the list. She does still feature one of her new releases that came out last year. I'm going to go through the list. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book and why it stayed with me as my favourite for each month. Okay, so my favourite book that I read in January 2021 was Black and British: A Forgotten History by David Olusoga. This, I think, has ended up being the only non-fiction on this list, so that's good to show like how important I felt this book was. This book does what it says on the tin, really. It goes through British history and brings out some of the forgotten stories about particularly Black people, but other people of colour as well, and how their history fits in with British history from way back to Roman times, when the Roman Empire covered such a vast part of the globe, including a lot of Africa. And so people from all over the empire ended up in Britain, and it often gets overlooked. Include a lot about colonisation and how the slave trade worked and all sorts of this stuff that is really important to know, that is often left out of history lessons in school. And that is really why I've chosen this as my favourite book of January, because it has stayed with me, some of the things that I learned from that book. And I think it's really important that we talk more about some of these forgotten stories from history, but also how our colonial past affects our present, and that is a history that a lot of people want to erase. Yeah, really important book, and I'm really glad that I read it. So my favourite book of January was Black and British: A Forgotten History by David Olusoga. My favourite book that I read in February was The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This was the final book in the Daevabad trilogy, now one of my all-time favourite series. I want to reread it soon. I don't know if I will get to reread it this year or if I'll save it for next year, because actually some of the volumes are in storage at the moment and I'm not entirely sure where. So it might have to wait until I move and can have all my books around me again, but it's going to be a series that I'm going to reread loads. There's a short story collection set in this world coming out this year, which I'm super excited for. What I loved about this series was the characters. I found them really engaging. The three protagonists, the three perspective characters, really each of them had something that kept me reading, wanting to know what happened to them. One of them particularly I didn't like at the start of the third book, but by the end of the series he was my favourite character, and I think that just shows a lot of skill in writing, that you can have a character that seems so unlikable to start with and have him become a fan favourite by the end. And just the intricacies of the plot and how it was all worked out, the drama, the humour, just the magic, the world building. There was so much to love in this series, and I've been trying really hard to find other books that hit that mark, and so far haven't found them. So I think I just need to reread that series really and stop hoping that other kind of desert inspired fantasies are going to live up to it, because sadly so far they haven't. So favourite book of February was The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. My favourite book in March was The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. And when I look back at the list, I was really surprised that it was March that I read this, because there's so much of it that's still so vivid in my head. And actually at the time, I only gave it 4 stars. It's the only book on this list that I gave 4 stars to. And I think if I reread it, it would probably get bumped up to 5 stars because of how well it has stayed with me. The emotions that I felt when reading it, I can still recall how much that book meant at the time that I was reading it. So it's definitely one that I want to get a copy of, because I borrowed it as an ebook from the library. So I do want to get my own copy so that I can reread it. It was my first time reading V.E. Schwab as well, and so far I haven't read anything else by her, because I suppose I don't want to be disappointed if I don't love it as much as I enjoyed that book. But she's definitely an author that I want to read more of in the future. Again, the characters, the world building, those things are really important to me when I read. I prefer character-based novels over plot-based. Like, I like there to be a plot, but actually I like the exploration of character and character development. But I have to have characters that I can root for. And in this book I really did. Even though the characters were really incredibly flawed and at moments unlikable, I still was rooting for them and wanting things to turn out for them. So that was really, really good. I mean, all of these books are ones that I want to reread, but yeah, that one, I think definitely a second read of it would just increase my admiration for it and get it that 5th star. So my favourite book in March was The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. My favourite book in April was A Kind of Spark by Elle McNicoll. This, I think, is the only middle grade on the list. So this book came in a Ninja book box. And it was a book that I'd heard a bit about on book Twitter, and kind of one that had been on my radar to try and pick up. It's from an autistic author, and the protagonist and one of her siblings is autistic. And so there was a lot of exploration of how that neurodivergence affected the characters. So it had been on my radar, so I was really excited when it came in the Ninja book box. And again, it comes down to the characters. That protagonist was such a great character. The exploration of the history of her area is set in a village in Scotland, I think, if I remember correctly. The main character becomes really obsessed with the witch trials that took place in the region, realising that a lot of the women that were killed in the witch trials they were a bit odd, and in modern society we would probably recognise them as being maybe either mentally unwell or having a neurodivergence. And so to go on this journey with this protagonist of seeing how people like her had been persecuted in the past was really powerful, and I definitely want to read more from this author. So my favourite book for April was A Kind of Spark by Elle McNicoll. My favourite book in May was The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a series that I definitely need to carry on with, and I haven't yet because I want to buy the rest of the series rather than borrow it. So it's top of my list for when I have a bit of money in my book budget to pick up. I think the thing that I really loved about this was the way it was written. It wove in chapters from different timelines, and I love books that are told across multiple timelines. And there was also chapters that were written in second person, which is really difficult to do well, and N.K. Jemisin really pulled it off. And then to see how these different perspectives and different timelines came together was just mind-blowing, and I was just so amazed and impressed by how the book turned out. I just loved it. I really, really loved it. So I'm hoping to pick up the next book soon. It's on my list of series I want to finish this year, and hopefully we'll be able to carry on that series soon, because I need to do it while I still have some memory of the first book. So I want to do that before it gets too long. Again, this is another one that I hadn't realised how early in the year I'd read it, really. So my favourite book for May was The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. My favourite book for June was Do You Dream of Terra 2 by Temi O. This book I picked up because 1 month for Space Sirens Book Club, we'd nominated books that we considered to be underrated gems, and this on my books to find list. So it was a book that I'd been wanting to try and get hold of at some point to read, and I hadn't realised how few reviews it had, how few ratings. And even though it wasn't the book we ended up picking for book club for that month, I still tracked down a copy anyway from my library and decided to read it anyway, and I'm so glad I did, because it was just excellent. So this was alternate history sci-fi set in kind of a present day world, but one that is much more advanced in terms of space travel than our world. And it followed the stories of a group of astronauts travelling to a distant world called Terra 2 in the hopes of creating a new human colony there. But what I loved about this book was, while it was sci-fi, actually it was an in-depth character study of these different characters that end up in this spaceship together, and how their interactions are affected by not being able to get away from each other. There's a big tragic event that happens just before the ship is due to leave that really affects the dynamics of the group, and to see that play out in a situation where the people can't get away from each other, just I thought was exquisitely done. Really, really, really loved it. I mean, pretty much all of these authors are on the list of authors that I want to read more from. And I think pretty much all of them would become auto-read authors, if not auto-buy. Yeah, can't wait for more books from Temi, and definitely one that I want to reread at some point. So my favourite book for June was Do You Dream of Terra 2 by Temi. My favourite book for July was A Psalm for the World Built by Becky Chambers. I said she was going to feature. This was her first book in a new series. It was a novella in the Monk and Robot series, and for me it was really lovely to see her writing in a different world and a slightly different style and character to the Wayfarers books. I really, really love the Wayfarers books. I reread the first 3 last year in order to read the final one, which I haven't been able to bring myself to read yet because I just don't want that series to be over. So I feel slightly better about reading it, having read the first book in the Monk and Robot series and seeing how good that was, that I feel more prepared to finally finish Wayfarers soon. What I loved about this book particularly was the exploration of vocations. One of the characters is a tea monk, but he's become quite disillusioned with his vocation and whether it's really what he should be doing with his life. So he essentially goes on this pilgrimage where he meets this robot and kind of tries to understand what his calling and his vocation is again. For me, that was really poignant at a time when I'm thinking a lot about what my vocation is and what I want to do with my life. And I just found it really moving. Becky Chambers could have written my favourite book for at least 4 of these months, but I've selected her for July. My favourite book for July was A Psalm for the World Built by Becky Chambers. My favourite book for August was This Poison Heart by Kailyn Bayron. This was my second time reading one of her books. It's the first of a duology and I cannot wait for the second book to come out this year. I am so excited for it. This book just played on my emotions so much. There were ups and downs and twists and turns. The central protagonist Bree was just so endearing. Her family relationships were so well explored, and then the magic elements, the fantasy elements, the way that they built into the plot, it was wild, which is an appropriate word considering that it's all about plant magic. And the ending, oh my gosh, the ending just, I was in floods of tears at the ending, even though I saw certain parts of it coming. I'm getting emotional now just thinking about it. So much looking forward to that second part of that duology coming out this year, and she's another author that is on my new favourite authors list, and I just want to keep reading her books as soon as she writes them. My favourite book for August was This Poison Heart by Kailyn Bayron. My favourite book for September was The Unlikely Escape of Uriah Heep by H.G. Parry. This was a book about books, which is always enjoyable. It explored a lot of themes from classics but put them in kind of a modern setting. It followed a book summoner who could pull characters out of books. Just the interactions between the human characters and the fictional characters was just so much fun, mainly told from the perspective of the brother of the summoner, and like him trying to deal with his brother's eccentricities and maintain a normal life and manage family relationships while keeping this kind of big secret. And it was so clever and so funny and so honouring of the literature tradition and reading and readers that I just thought it was fun and beautiful and clever and really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all these books so much I'm running out of superlatives to describe them. So my favourite book for September was The Unlikely Escape of Uriah Heep by H.G. Parry. My favourite book for October was Ninefox Gambit by Yoon Lee. This is the first book in the Machineries of the Empire trilogy. Also read the second book and hoping to get the third one from the library soon to finish off that series. This book I loved because it was just mind-blowing. Like, it's very confusing, complicated sci-fi, but it gave me the same vibes that I got from reading the Imperial Raj trilogy by Anne Leckie a couple of years ago, of just this complicated sci-fi empire and all the interworkings of that and how people who don't entirely fit into the empire feel about the empire. Yeah, I can't even describe it. I've struggled in videos where I've talked about the series to explain why this book was so good, because the book is just very difficult to explain in general. The humour, the complexity, the technology, and again the characters a lot of it does come back to the characters. So again, the protagonist in this book was so likeable, and then paired with the other protagonist who was very morally grey and trying to understand his motivations and how his influence affected her, and it is just so well done, so cleverly done. I just really loved it. Really loved the writing, and so excited to finish that series soon. So my favourite book for October was Ninefox Gambit by Yoon. My favourite book for November was Wahala by Nikki May. This I had from NetGalley as an ARC, and I actually did review it before it came out, and I will link my review in the description box for you. This was probably my favourite thing I had from NetGalley all year, and actually is the only NetGalley arc to feature on this list. This was contemporary but with an edge. There was a lot of tension, there was a lot of drama. The characterization and the way the characters interacted with each other and how their stories developed. Again, I was really rooting for them the whole time, even though sometimes they were making some really questionable choices, and I just really loved the way the story developed and the tension that just took it to the next level, because I was expecting quite a fun contemporary, but then there was this layer of tension running through it that just made the whole book so enjoyable and intense. There was just so much love in there. So check out my review if you want to hear a bit more about why I loved that one so much. But my favourite book for November was Wahala by Nikki May. And then finally, my favourite book for December was actually the one I picked as my best book in December on the stats, and I know that because it's not that long since I filmed it. My dilemma with December was that there were perhaps two books that I enjoyed more, but they were both sequels. So I've settled on this one again because I've already talked about Ninefox Gambit, and my other favourite book in December was Raven's Stratagem, which is the sequel. My favourite book for December, I haven't actually said, was Elantris by Sanderson. This one really made the list because it was one that lived up to my expectations. I'd been really nervous about reading Sanderson because so many of my friends really love his books, and I'd read his contribution to The Wheel of Time, but I'd never read anything he'd written like directly himself, purely himself. And I'd been really nervous to pick anything up in case I didn't love it as much as I hoped I would. So to read it and enjoy it as much as I did was really encouraging for me, and was a good example of how avoiding things because of hype doesn't always work out for you in the long run. So I was really pleased that my friends encouraged me to read this, to read Sanderson at all, but specifically to start with this book, because it just showed me that I do really like his writing, I do really enjoy his world building, and it just makes me excited that I just have so many more books from him to read in the future. My favourite book for December was Elantris by Sanderson. I realised that for a lot of these books I haven't gone too in depth into what the synopses are or the storylines, and that's partly because some of them I read a while ago, so that's not necessarily what stayed with me. What stayed with me more is how I felt about reading them. I heartily recommend all of these books that I mentioned. I've covered a variety of genres on this list. I mean, leaning more to the fantasy and sci-fi, but there are a couple that fit more as contemporary and there's a non-fiction in there. So it's quite a wide variety of genres and authors, and a little variety of age ranges as well. I've had a really good reading year in 2021. I've enjoyed a lot of what I've read, and so I only hope that this year, 2022, I can have again some really good books to read, and probably lots more by some of these authors that I've mentioned. So thank you for watching me talk about some of my favourite books of 2021. I'd love to know what some of your favourite books of 2021 were, so let me know in the comments. Also let me know if you read any of the books I mentioned and what you thought of them. If you just want to let me know that you've been here and can't think of anything specific to say, leave me a gold star emoji in the comments, because I would give all of these books gold stars. You can also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on my social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!